Good evening and welcome to the Claw Studio at the Royal Opera House and to this Insight event supported by Rolex. I'm Flora Wilson and tonight we'll be exploring Mozart's Die Zauberflöte, the magic flute. It's one of Mozart's final works and his last ever opera to be premiered just a couple of months before he died aged 35. And what an opera it is. On the one hand, it's a spectacular showdown between good and evil, a quest for enlightenment complete with grueling trials, monsters and magic. And on the other hand, it's about the power of love and about one average bloke's search for a girlfriend. No wonder it's one of the most regularly performed operas in the world today. David McVicker's production was created for the Royal Opera House back in 2003, and it's vividly beautiful. It depicts the forces of light and dark in an almost painterly way. And now, for its most recent revival here at Covent Garden, we have Maxim Emelianichev conducting a distinguished cast, including some former Jetta Parker artists, in its leading roles. Well, tonight we'll be going behind the scenes of this revival to talk about what it means to bring Mozart back to the stage. I'll be speaking to Maxim and also to members of the cast, and of course, as always, we'll be hearing some of the wonderful music from Mozart's enchanting score. But first, I am delighted to welcome revival director Angelo Smimmo to tell us more about bringing this opera back to the stage here at the Royal Opera. Please welcome him now. Angelo, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a busy day, I know, a busy few weeks. You're right in the middle of rehearsals.
Yes.
You're just over 2 weeks, I think, to opening night.
Yes.
What have you been up to today?
Oh, everything. I mean, it's a monstrous piece, as you know, magic flute, where to start from. Today was a special day. It was all about women, actually, just for a coincidence. We didn't plan it. But we started with the Queen of the Night, and then Pamina, and then Papagena, talking about women in 1791.
Now there's a topic.
That was a big topic. Talking about being an avant-garde piece of theater. There's nothing more than Zauberflöte, according to my opinion. I mean, they were talking about a group of men deciding on how to allow youth and women to have a voice in the society. And that all started from this young guy, Mozart, Wolfgang. They came out and say, hey guys, to move forward, to hope to live in a future of beauty and wisdom, you have to let women in and young people in, which the society at the time didn't really consider. And that's where, today we started, we were looking at ladies.
So just small topics, really, to get you going.
Yes. Yes.
So you have your own long history with this work, I think, don't you?
Yes, it's really exciting because I was in it. I was one of the little monkeys running around in the forest. I am initially a dancer. I started with Bejar, and then I went into singing, and then I had a career as a countertenor. And then I was in dance theater. I went back to dance theater because I really was missing the movement and the body in the world of opera at the time. I'm talking about centuries ago. And then, strangely enough, director of the company I used to work with, Michael Kigandola, was working in this house and was choreographing Macbeth, and told me, come around and have a class with us. And I went, I came. And the casting director at the time, Dermot, saw me in the room and said, oh, we are auditioning for this magic flute. Do you want to dance in an opera? I was like, dancing in an opera? Never done it, but why not? And that was it. So Lea Hausmann was a fantastic woman that did the movement at the time, chose me at the audition. And after a couple of times, after a few shows, she came to me and said, I don't have the time to go to revive this to Rome. I come just for a little short period. Can you take care of it? And that's how my big love with opera and movement started. And that's, and then here we are after many years. Yes.
I mean, it's incredible that you are here today in the capacity as a director, as a revival director, but you've done so many of these other roles within the creative side of a production already. Do you think that changes how you approach directing?
I think it's best to be a dancer to sing Mozart. I think with Mozart especially, who never shies away from descriptions, is never banal, but is always descriptive and very deep. The music always informs before or after what you have to sing. And then it's, you can ask my colleagues when we work, I am very much in touch with the music before the words, because originally I'm a dancer. So we listen with our body before to listen with our heads. And then the head come in afterwards. And with Magic Flute, it's very specific because, it's storytelling. And it's very exciting for a director because you have so many characters. And it's about music, text, rhythm, and beauty. And how to achieve beauty? Through obsessive repetitions. What it looks like something that happens for coincidence is never for coincidence. It's always a lot of work and very, very, very specific and very repetition. Yeah.
Amazing. So your rehearsals are doing all that work so that the magic appears to us on stage.
Yes.
I wonder, reviving someone else's production is presumably a particular kind of challenge. How do you approach that? You've been familiar with this production for a long time.
Yes, it is, but I always think of it, I'm Italian, I'm from south of Italy, so food is very important to us. I always think of reviving a production a bit like making another recipe. The dish is always the same, the ingredients are different, and how you cook them, that's the key. So all the time there's a new singer, artist coming through the door, my task is to try and get the best out of them. And then once you get the best out of them, to say what you need to say, how do you put it in the pot with the others so that the flavor is right according to the original recipe, David McVicar, and Mozart. And that's what you do and you juggle. So it's always new because the ingredients are always different and very exciting all the time. Yeah.
Okay, I've ignored it for a while. I've got to ask, what are you holding?
This is one of the most beautiful things, I think, in the show. The show starts with this. And the actors come in through the auditorium and bringing young actors this light, which is 1791, is the end of enlightenment. And what Mozart is saying, what David McVicar is saying, bring light to the audience, from within the audience. The wisdom that we're talking about is not a wisdom that comes from someone up above, aristocracy. We know what they thought about aristocracy at the time. 1791, prior to that, 2 years before, people were
the French Revolution.
Yes, lost their heads. So we know what they thought about aristocracy. Wisdom has to come from the daily life, from the people that are in the street and understand their needs. And that's what happens in the show in the beginning. The actors bring that light from the auditorium onto the stage. And then you finish with, the opera finishes with the most...
I think we have a picture of this, actually, that we can see of what this looks like, what you're about to say, Angelo.
Yeah. Yeah, the end of... It's really, I find it very moving and gorgeous that the end of... Yes. The end of the opera is the chorus that gives the last message. It's not the prince or the princess or the queen of the night or Sarastro. It's the chorus that comes forward and says, wisdom and beauty are the two things that will help us to move to a better world. When wisdom and beauty will be accomplished, we will live in a better society. And it comes from the people.
It's this beautiful idea of a kind of grassroots philosophy, because that's not how we tend to think of the Enlightenment these days. It seems complicated and difficult.
It's very simple, and Mozart is very simple. Magic Flute is all about taking life easy and light with the innocence of a child. The kids are the three Knaben that will lead the way to wisdom for a reason. And with Mozart, even when he touches topics that are really, really pertinent and heavy, like talking about women. If you go in the second act, there's the duet of the two priests, and they talk about women in a way that you don't want to hear. But if you hear the music that goes with it, you understand what he's trying to say. I have also always to remember that it was a job to be a composer, and you needed to get money. And you are always a son of a period or a society. So if there were topics that were relevant for that period, of course Mozart would abide to some of them and also be very clever, because in order for him to have money to produce something beautiful, he had to say certain things in a certain way so that the donor will give the money. But then he says it his way, so it makes you believe something. And if you listen to the music that comments always what he's trying to say, it tells you the truth. So it's not misogynistic. There's no one that loved women more than Mozart, as we all know. It's absolutely not. The way that the Queen of the Nile needs to die, it's, to give birth. To become a man, you have to get rid of your mother, not your father. The mother needs to die in order for a human being to grow, being a woman or a man. That's why the Queen of the Night dies. And then we can go on and on and on and on, historically, who she was and what it did, and there's so many layers to it. But just on a very, very simple, easy way, the mother needs to go for the boy to be a man.
So, I mean, this really is an opera that gets to the heart of what it means to be human when you put it like this. I wonder,
Absolutely.
How do you think that David McVicar has approached all of this in his production? How would you characterize it for people who haven't seen it, perhaps? And I wonder whether we could have some more of those pictures.
David is a genius. That's my opinion. And he respects the music and the text so deeply that he understands that there is so much in it. There is no need to invent more. You don't need to set it on a space shuttle or in anywhere else to make it palatable? No, how do you say it in English? So my Italian comes in. Tasty for an audience. Mm-hmm. You don't need to invent things. You just have to stick to what he wrote and go really into the text.
So actually we can see here, it's a kind of, it's a magical space, isn't it, I suppose? It's not a particular historical moment or a place.
And that's also very interesting that, it's very, I say, a coup de théâtre la McVicar, that you follow it through and it looks that it's set in a period, but then you will have some characters will emerge, like Papagena or like the Tricknaben. They are dressed in modern clothes, and the message being they could be, the story applies to any time, for any centuries. These characters could have come from the future, not the past, because the story is the same.
I love the three boys in this production, actually, because we see them coming flying in on a kind of unlikely steampunk flying machine of some kind. And I think it's it's exactly what you're saying about sort of, it's not the past, it's not exactly the future, it could be any time. It's speaking to something much longer than that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What else? I wonder, we missed, I think, perhaps there was one more picture. There we go. I wonder, Angela, could you tell us what's going on here?
That's the end of first act. Is where the two lovers finally meet, which is also very difficult challenge for us to make you believe that love at first sight actually exists, because these guys have met like 35 minutes prior to that. For the first time, they're madly in love. And it's the end of the first act where they meet, and Sarastro tells them, you're not ready yet. You have to go through trials. You have to have the rite of passage, and then eventually you'll reunite in love and prosperity. That's the passage. Yeah.
Sarastro has always seemed such an interesting character to me here, that
Yes.
we're introduced to him as the baddie, the bad guy, and then it becomes clearer that that's not quite right.
No, he's never the baddie. He's always the good one. He's the one that he is the one in the beginning of second act that he's got the biggest challenge to convince a group of white men that allowing a young man and a woman in society was the right thing to do. He's the initiator. And, precisely, if you want to go back historically, there is a guy that in 1784 called Ignaz von Born. There was a friend of Leopold II, the king at the time, and was one of the Masonic brother. They brought his own daughter for the first time to a meeting of Masons, which is something we see in the show, because in the first act, in the Sprecher's room, there is a little girl and a little boy. And so this is a very avant-garde character, a very forward character that we have in the story. It's not a baddie at all.
I think we have to point to the fact that we've actually got one of Sarastro's costumes here, this amazingly rich fabric. It really is spectacular to look at.
Yes, Sarastro comes from Zaraustra. Of course, that's where he comes from. He's the guy that has the knowledge, is the king of the sun, which is the opposite of the queen of the night in our story, of course. So it's good and bad. And you can see the sun and all the references in this wonderful costume.
It's shot through with gold thread, as you might be able to see. And then next to him, we've got, I think, one of Pamina's dresses. Is that right?
Yes, Pamina, yes. Very simple.
Exactly. It's the simplicity and the white, kind of virginal, I suppose, colour there. Again, really, really beautiful. It's so clear that you absolutely love this piece.
Yes.
I wonder, are there particular challenges of staging it? I think perhaps especially the fact that it's technically a Singspiel, it's a sung play, and there are spoken passages.
To start talking after a big number has happened, or you have a full orchestra and you come in with a dialogue, how do you keep the rhythm? How do you not make the audience bored and disconnect with the story? And especially this, you know, I like to work scene by scene, sometimes I do it without them singing at all, so they can only embody the music underneath and the rhythm of what we're trying to say. Because when the music goes, they naked with their own voices. And singers, like everyone else, you know, they feel very supported by the music. Once you take the music out, it's like taking the ground under their feet. And then you have to help them with them. And rhythm is the key. And recreating beauty, which is what I said, you know, it's a very hard work. And this specific in this production, because everything is very specific, very precise to the centimeters, in order for you to have an image of beauty all the time you see it.
Well, this has given us a lot to think about when we go to see this, just to think of all the work that's gone on in the background to really create that kind of precision. Angelo, thank you so much for making the time.
I want to say one last thing before I go, is that I think that most of all, Magic Flute is an emotional testament, because Mozart would die after a few months of that. And I think that he wrote a piece where all these wishes for a better world were contained. And I think that if there is only even one person in the audience to which those topics make any sense, then his testament will be accomplished, and I'll be happy.
Thank you so much, Angelo. I know it's been a long day. It's fantastic to have you here. Very best wishes for the rest of rehearsals. I think you'd better take your orb with you, but thank you so much for bringing it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.